G'day guys, it's Jacob from the Trypod here to preview NFL Week 2, where we don't break down every NFL game every week from a punting perspective as you used to in the NRL. Alex explained this last week that while the two seasons are overlapping, we're going to keep our NFL picks pod a bit shorter. We do all the same amount of work. We cap all the games, we look at every factor we can, and we see what we each like on the games, and then we come together and the games that we strongly agree, we're going to find your best bets. But for the podcast, we're only going to talk about the games where we have found something that we think is advisable to make a best bet. Plus, we might throw in a couple of the marquee games like your Sunday night, your Monday night games, because I know everyone's going to be asking. But if you've got picks on the other games, or you'd like to know our opinion on the other games, we might have had a reason why we still lean to a side, or just a reason why we stayed off a game, feel free to hit us up in the comments, of course. On top of that, this is not your typical NFL preview. I'm not going to mention every factor in every game because a lot of the factors are very well known. They're built into the odds anyway. What we try and do is establish factors that either are not being accounted for or are not being accounted for enough. Because if we can find things like that that are in our favor, that's where we get an edge. And the NFL arguably has the sharpest lines of any sport in the world because of the level of scrutiny, because there's only, the games that are spaced a week apart, not like something like your baseball, your hockey, your NBA, where there's games every day and there's opportunities. There's so much money and so many smart people betting into this. It's very hard to beat. And on that note, I'm going to give a word of warning. You guys know last week, 4 best bets, 4 winners. We had a 28-1 multi, we cashed it. We had an 18-1 multi, we cashed it. We're 3-0 this weekend on the NRL. We're 63% against the spread in all of 2020 on the NRL. So you guys might be thinking that these bets just about can't lose, but I'm going to give you a word of warning that it's just not, 60% is just not even realistic or possible for really anybody over a season of NFL. We would be stoked if we could hit the 55% mark. Honestly, we love the NFL. We love breaking it down. We love finding value. We have faith that we can win more than we lose. So we're hoping that we can steer you guys into at least a marginal profit through the season, and then with that profit you can be throwing that on multis, and as I just said, look at the sweet results we got last week. But of course, no bet is a lock or anything like that, and it's just that much harder in a sport where, for example, in the NRL, Alex and I could really love a game, and we could say we honestly think this line should be 4 points different to what it is. In the NFL, it's so rare that we would ever think a line could be that wrong. So on that note, I'm only going to talk about 4 upcoming games for NFL Week 2. I've got 3 best bets to share with you guys. The key theme that we're going to look for, and it's what's leading us to some best bets and also keeping us off some sides in Week 2, is do not overreact to Week 1. And it's a tough one because that's all you've seen of these teams this season, so you want to judge everybody by how they played last week. But there's a couple of reasons why it's really silly to overreact. For one, every game, one team wins, one loses, and the narrative is always, oh yeah, this team won, they did this well, and this team lost, what's wrong? And I'll give you a good example, the Cowboys against the Rams. I mean, that game, the Rams win by 3, we're happy. I think we had Rams +3, but there's a 70-yard touchdown at the end of the game that gets ruled out on a pretty bogus offensive pass interference call. What I'm getting at is one play can flip a game, and yet it completely changes the way that everyone views these teams. So why does one team that wins get all the praise and the team that loses is in the toilet all of a sudden, when there could have been a key third down or a turnover and the score could have been 10 points different? The other thing is, of course, in Week 1, we don't know for sure how good everyone is or how bad everyone is. So 2 teams could play each other that could be both really good. We just don't know it yet. One's still going to lose that game and not be looking good in Week 2. And of course, on the other side of the coin, you could have 2 teams meet, especially when they both had reasonable preseason expectations, but they really might both be bad teams this season. But when they play each other, the winning team is going to look good. And the truth is, neither of them were very good. So it's just multiple reasons why we have to factor in what we saw, but we have to try and filter out what's real and what was just the team's best day or worst day. So let's see how we go. Let's jump into Week 2. Okay, the first game I really like in Week 2 is the Lions at the Packers. The line is roughly Packers favored by 6.5. And we've got a team that looked pretty terrible in week 1, and we were happy to benefit from that. The Lions choked on a 17-point lead against the Bears. We cashed our best bet there. But the truth is, 1 or 2 plays go differently. The Lions could have won that game quite comfortably. They get a couple guys back, like the cornerback, Okuda. You look at the other side of it, the Packers couldn't have really looked better in week 1. And I watched that game closely against the Vikings. The Vikings were absolutely deplorable. So I'm not sure how great the Packers are. They come home, and we know that historically they're strong at Lambeau Field, but there's no fans, so that mitigates that advantage somewhat. And I just think the Lions have a decent roster. They want to do something this season. They're going to be that slightly bit more desperate, being the winless side. One thing that would have me concerned is the Lions without their number 1 wide receiver, Kenny Golladay. That's why I think the best bet to get at this game is take the Packers team total under 28.5. Very key number there, with 28 being 4 touchdowns. And even if you don't score 4 touchdowns, teams go for 2-point conversions to get on key numbers and things like that. So that's under 28.5 at Bet365, or I would even play it under 28 flat. On Lads and Neds, it's 5 cents better price. You're not going to win if it lands 28, but you're not going to lose either. Now, just to add to that, you might think that's very brave going against Aaron Rodgers, taking his team total under, especially after how good he looked last week. But we do like to fade the big narratives that come out of week 1, because it's often overblown and overpriced in the marketplace. And everyone's kind of thinking Aaron Rodgers is going to have a vintage FU season. They drafted a QB week 1. He's going to want to prove it. But the truth is, if you've watched closely over the last, couple of seasons, I know that the Packers got to the title game in the NFC last year, but Aaron Rodgers is not the same player that he was. The Packers don't mind keeping the ball on the ground. And just when you like an underdog, and we definitely lean more to the Lions, but you're a bit concerned about how much they're going to score, and they're a dome team that's now got to come play outdoors, then that's where, if you like kind of lean under and you lean to the dog, then you take the favorite under a team total. Next game is the Panthers at the Buccaneers, and the Panthers are getting 8 points. And I feel like this is another game that people will overreact to what they saw in week 1, where the Buccaneers got handily blown out by the Saints. But the truth of that game was it was actually a little bit closer than the final score. Brady throws a pick 6. Brady gets picked off another time. They turn over the ball receiving a kickoff. And I just feel a little bit like the Lions, that Tampa Bay is a team that's got a lot of positive energy, a lot of talented players, and they believe they can do big things this year. And you're going to get an all-in effort when they come home, absolutely going to beat their division rival here. Whereas the Panthers, who knows what to make for them? They're truly in a rebuilding year. They've got no roster continuity, which is very hard in a COVID year with less preparation time. They're not really concerned with winning a lot of games this year anyway. I feel like they don't mind getting high draft picks. Other than McCaffrey, there's not much to kind of like on this team. And I know they covered last week, or they were right around the spread against Vegas Raiders, but who really knows, how good Vegas are and what to make of that game. So I feel like Tampa Bay is way too good. Now, it's a high line, and when you'd like to play a favorite, you don't get a heap of value. And I've looked around. I'm going to take a slight risk here. Best value I can find is Tampa Bay to come out strong and win the first quarter, covering the -1.5. So it's unlikely you win a first quarter by 1 anyway, unless there's a missed extra point involved. But they should win the first quarter by at least a field goal. And the reason there's a little bit of risk is, whoever receives the opening kickoff will have an advantage of having an extra possession. But I just like the fact that I think they're going to start strong. They want to play from in front. They're at home, and they should just be way too good for the Panthers. So the best bet on this game is Tampa Bay -1.5 in the first quarter at $1.83. You'll find that under quarter markets on Unibet. Alternatively, you can always just play them to win the first quarter straight up, and that's $1.78 in a three-way market. And that would also win if they win by exactly 1. But being under $1.80, we can't take that as a best bet. Next game I'll talk about is Sunday Night Football. Should be an absolute cracker of a game, and look, we'll at least have a good same-game multi for you boys. It's a tough one to bet on based on how the markets are right now. Of course, it is the Patriots at the Seahawks, and the Seahawks are 4-point favourites. Both teams very impressive in week 1. It's a whole new system in New England. Of course, you've still got Belichick and McDaniels, but Cam Newton under center replacing Brady is just a totally different style of quarterback. And what we saw was him using his athletic prowess last week, running riot over Miami. And that's a whole new threat that you've got to account for, the running ability in Cam, completely different quarterback to Tom Brady, as we know. Now, New England's not the same powerhouse this year, at least they shouldn't be, with the opt-outs they've had on the defensive side of the ball, and the defense was really what made them such a good team last year. But it's hard to bet against a genius like Belichick. With Seattle, super impressive last week, so you don't really want to beat on them when they look so good, but I think that the scoreline, if anything, flattered the Falcons because Matt Ryan had like 450 kind of garbage time yards. The Falcons were behind the whole game and kept on kind of scoring just to pull it back close. But Seattle dominated. But the key takeaway from that Seattle Atlanta game in week 1 was letting Russ throw the ball more. And people might say, oh, Russ, is playing better this season, but he's not actually playing any better. He's just been given more opportunities to throw the ball. He's as good as, he's right up there, I think, with the very best quarterbacks on the planet, really. So I see this Seattle team as a true contender. Alex was a bit more split on the game. I would be laying the points with Seattle, but the markets in Australia is like pretty much Seattle's a -4 favorite. We know that they've typically got a very strong home advantage, but that's mitigated with no crowd. That basically takes away the 12th man. And I'm not going to jump on Seattle when the markets are all pricing them at about a -4 favorite, when in the States it's moving more towards -3.5. So stay tuned. Maybe I talk to Alex, and maybe if the markets shift, like if we can lay a flat 3 with Seattle, that could be the best way to play this game on Sunday night. And then Monday Night Football, we have the Las Vegas Raiders playing their home opener, first game in Vegas in the new stadium against the New Orleans Saints. So both these teams won in week 1, both won high-scoring games. I already talked about the Saints game. That was kind of a phony final in terms of how many points were put on because of the defensive scores or short fields that were created by turnovers. People still think of the New Orleans Saints as a high-flying offense, I think, but with Drew Brees, he throws the ball, less and less further down the field every season. They lean a little bit more in the run game. They just gave a huge contract to Kamara, their running back. And meanwhile, they've stacked their defense in the draft, and they've actually got, a top 10 defense in the NFL that's probably the stronger unit than the offense, especially this week with their stud wide receiver, Michael Thomas, not being available for the game. For the Raiders, they do not have a great defense, terrible last year, but I think it's improving. The team should definitely be amped up, and play with a huge amount of heart and spirit and effort in the, as I said, in the Vegas opener. They love feeding this Josh Jacobs at running back, and we know that when teams keep it on the ground, keeps the clock rolling, and therefore allows less opportunities to put on points. Regarding injuries, the Saints do have their number 1 defensive lineman, Marcus Davenport, questionable, and I think he missed practice on Friday. But so did Henry Ruggs, the speedster wide receiver for the Vegas Raiders. They picked in the first round, and he looked really good last week. They've also got other questionable guys, the Raiders, on their offensive line. So anytime you've got offensive injuries as well, especially O-line disruption early in a season where teams had less time to prep to begin with, you question how many points the offenses are going to put on. I love the under in this game. Best bet under 49.5 at $1.91 on Unibet. It's also $49.5, $1.86 on Sportsbet. So that will wrap the Week 2 preview pod. I'll post these best bets as well as a couple of multis. You guys want to see those multis in the Trypod app straight after this pod goes live, and they'll also be on the Trypod or in the Trypod Facebook group. And as I said, we keep it brief. I probably went a little bit longer on the intro, being my first NFL pod this year, but we're going to keep this pod very short and sharp, at least for the next kind of 6 weeks while it overlaps with footy. But if you want to go more in depth, we're happy to kind of discuss any of the games and any factors that we're thinking about. The best place to talk to us about it is in the comments on this video or in the Trypod Facebook group. Good luck, guys. Have a great weekend on the punt, and we'll see you back Sunday to recap NRL round 19. Or if you're interested in NFL, of course, I'll see you next week at 11 a.m. Lego.